Within that was a great deal of collaboration between the businesses, because they weren't startups, these were all technology businesses that were established but were now homeless. So it was good to see sort of maturing businesses collaborate. It was great for the energy of people who were affected to be back at work and doing things positive. And then we'd seen the community get involved, and many public events been organised. Since we actually opened, we've done over 700 public events for nearly 17,000 people.
Okay.
So the fellowship was about really me learning how that's scaling globally, what's happening in, I guess, collaborative communities, both technology and otherwise.
Right.
I got to travel across the States and meet people who were running incubators and hubs, because I wondered if there was value in working on a system to connect them more. But what was quite good about the fellowship is you learn there's a lot you don't know.
Yeah.
And I learned there were many ways for hubs to collaborate. There were networks existing, there were shared funds, so I didn't need to go and do that. Mm-hmm. So I left my kind of program, although the fellowship's for life, I left that particular trip with the feeling that it wasn't necessary to do what I originally thought in terms of connecting people, but what I should still focus on was collaborative projects, working together, pushing myself harder to have a bigger positive impact. Yeah. Because you hear what some of the people have achieved, and it encourages you to maybe set your sights a little higher.
Right. So you rebuilt a campus for technology companies in a time when your city had been completely devastated, which is probably not what common sense dictates. You usually go into a place which is high profitability and high revenue and lesser risk, substantially lesser risk, and you say, okay, now let me build on the goodness of the people and the ecosystem there, but you did something completely opposite.
And I think that's what got a lot of attention, because I'd never even seen a co-hub before.
Right.
I'd never worked in a co-working space. I knew they were kind of around, but I knew nothing about them. And it only came around through necessity. I was the CEO of a computer games company, I was a director of some more, and there was nowhere for us to go. And I was having a drink one night with my business partner and good friend Colin Anderson, and his company was displaced, and we were talking about all our friends' companies that were displaced. And of course we live in an economy where landlords, some were taking an opportunity and saying, great, everybody needs our space, we'll pump the price up.
Right.
And it was literally bankrupting companies and our friends. There was nowhere to put our people. So after a while we thought, well, do we want to close our companies? No. Do we want to leave the city? No, we don't want to move the families who wanted to stay there. So the only thing we could do, even though we knew it was a bit like a design thinking, what's the only solution? Well, we're going to have to build a campus to house everyone.
All right.
Even though we didn't know how.
Okay.
And it was the opposite to what a lot of people do. And just building on your question, it's not like the norm. What got us the attention of quite a lot of international attention is we broke a lot of the rules, so we didn't fill it with startups. It wasn't a big government-funded incubator. The government did fund it, but it was a lot smaller than the private funding that we raised. We built it very quickly. We had to build, the actual construction took 6 months. Raising the money and getting the business case together took 12 months. And we broke pretty much every property development rule known to man, in that we originally didn't have a business, we had no experience, we had no money, we had no land, we had no capital. It was in an earthquake zone that was getting 20 shocks a day, and they had to move a military cordon so we could start building.
Right. So in addition to the entrepreneurship community that will log on or has logged on to listen to you, there are also a lot of students and universities that we reached out to, because we found your story particularly interesting from the perspective of how much risk it had and how much passion it had. And what I'm curious to find out is, how is it doing right now?
It's doing great.
Okay.
So originally the council kind of lent us the land.
Right.
So again, we had another challenge I didn't mention, which was we had to build it to a level that was 130% of the new earthquake code because we needed it to be safe.
Right.
Safe, big buildings are normally very expensive. We also were only given the land for 5 years, so we had to pay the whole thing off in 5 years.
Okay.
But we also couldn't charge a lot for the space because the companies we were putting in there had taken a good beating by the earthquake. So we had to make cheap space, really safe, but pay everything off in 5 years. Now, we were fortunate that we got the model to work, again, with a lot of assistance from great companies, 15 different advisory companies, architects, etc. But the model was so compelling that we were full from day one. So before we opened the doors, before we even started building it, the building was full. We'd got signed contracts from all the companies. Okay. Everything was full. Throughout the few years of operating it, sure, some companies go through hard times and some fail. New ones come in. We've always been full. In fact, at the time of this interview, we've had one company move on, and I think of the 4,500 square meters in the building, 75 square meters are available, and we've got 2 companies that may even have signed up while I've been in America.
Okay.
So that's I'm very proud of that, because what it means is people like being there, despite the fact that now 7 years after the earthquake, there's a lot more options in town. It's not like we're the only place they can go.
Right.
So it's great that people value what's been created.
Somebody sent in a question just now about what is your background, because you talked about being running a gaming company in addition to other things. So if you could just briefly talk about what your background is and how that has actually helped to build this incredible project and make it come to life.
So I did a business degree at university many years ago.
Okay.
And I was always interested in how people work together. I then worked for, my first job was with a technology company in the UK, and that taught me about business development. So I had to learn about business development. And then I moved into the management of business development. Did that for about 5 years. Then my dream had always been to move to New Zealand, because while I was a student, I'd travelled the world a little bit and sort of worked my way around various parts of the world, and I fell in love with New Zealand. I just loved the country. So I moved to New Zealand, sold everything I owned, turned up with a backpack and my savings, picked the place I wanted to live, which was Christchurch, and bought a house before I had a job, which was a bit risky. Spent everything I owned.
I'm sensing
People who've got a common interest. There is a lesson I learned the hard way, which is, you really have to find people who are actually good at what they do. They can't just be your friends. So also, you need to talk to the law firms, get good advice from that. You need to get great financial governance, so have a good accountant, deal with people that are experts in their field, and that means hard work, going out, meeting, planning how you're going to get the ultimate team together, because bad things will happen that are completely out of your control. I don't think we should fear them, but we should always be prepared for them.
Yeah. So it's interesting because you're not a techie.
No.
And yet you have made use of, you've created something which is to be used by techies.
Yeah.
Is the success of this a kind of a byproduct of the team, or is it that you feel that technology is the way forward and is what is needed for the uplifting of the economy?
It's a bit of both. The success of Epic, if we're talking about the campus, you're right, I'm not a techie. I wasn't a techie when I worked in any of the technology companies in the UK or New Zealand, or indeed the games companies. I always relied on having great people who knew what they did. Yeah. I just did one thing, which was business. The software guys made the software, the architects architected it, the artists in the games companies did beautiful artwork. I didn't need to worry about it. When we did the campus, we had a team of 15 companies working with us, all experts in their field, whether they were architects, accountants, project managers, you name it. Everybody did their role. And that was the reason for the success of the project. We had brilliant people doing what they're brilliant at. In answer to almost the second point, the financial benefit of the building to the region has been expressed as the fact that there's probably a couple of things. One, the companies in it, they weren't startups. One of the companies it floated on the stock exchange while we were there. We had people who were really smart in the building as well as building the building. And they gave knowledge to the other people. So the CEOs and the people in there got value from each other. They got no value from me, that we had a chat and we'd share things. But we weren't there to tell them how to run their businesses. They weren't fresh out of university. These were all people who had knowledge, and so they trusted and learned to work with each other. And I think that was a big help. They got value from each other. And then the last point that I think made it a success is, I remember early on we talked about the security of the building. When should the doors lock and should they open and should we have a wall? And we said absolutely not. We can't put something in the middle of the city and then tell people they can't come in and kind of section it off.
You want to be accessible.
Yeah, so we said, look, the doors open at a certain time, they close at a certain time, and we're going to have shared spaces that other people can come in and look. And that resulted in people saying, can we use it? And we never even thought of that. And we said, sure, not-for-profits, charities, schools, community groups, we're going to make some of the space available to you free of charge some of the time. And that was only possible because we had a simple business model that was profitable. We had to pay off the bank, so we couldn't be charitable. But because the business model was robust, we were strong enough to help people we wanted to help. And we could say to Code Club, that I'm a big fan of, when that was starting up in Christchurch, teaching young kids to code, yeah, absolutely, use the event space for free. When do you need it?
Okay. So there seems to be a big element of social entrepreneurship here also.
It's funny that you say that. People have said later, oh, you're doing social entrepreneurship. I never even knew the term.
Yeah.
It was just the right thing to do.
Right.
So I'm a big fan, but it wasn't a deliberate, let's set up a social enterprise, because I didn't know what one was. I don't think Colin did, or any of our other guys at the time, because that was 7 or 8 years ago.
Right.
And we were just trying to get everybody back together after an earthquake. That was all we were doing.
I know it's your last evening here in San Francisco and you want to say goodbye to the other fellows, so I'm just going to ask you one last question that's come in is, what has been your most surprising learning in setting up the campus?
That's a great question. There's been so much. I'm just trying to think in terms of surprising learning.
Something that you just weren't expecting.
I wasn't genuinely expecting all of the community activity that would pull ambassadors and people from other countries towards it. I mean, Christchurch is a small place. Mm-hmm. There's only 300,000 people there. It's in New Zealand, which is close to the Antarctic. And yet we'd got the place going. And I think as a mix of the fact that we designed the place with the tenants, so they loved it and they used it. I'd go in at weekends and people were gaming, and we'd opened it to the community, so there were hundreds of events that we never really managed. They just used it, which made the place popular and friendly. And I think that as a result meant whenever the government or the council were showing foreign dignitaries around the city, mm-hmm. Epic had become this really positive thing. That kind of one of the few things in your life that overachieves your expectations. So all of a sudden they'd say, oh, here's the US ambassador, or here's the group from the UK, or here's the group from anywhere else around the world. And we met like 20 different dignitary groups, which wasn't even part of our consideration.
Right.
So it was great to meet people from all around the world and to form relationships and friendships. That was completely unplanned.
I think the reason I've been hounding you down for the past day and a half is because I think your story is very interesting in all aspects, but the one thing I find extremely almost charismatic, and it's even more inspirational, is the fact that every time you've spoken about what you've done, either to me or to anyone else, there's always an element of surprise, a very pleasant surprise in your expression that, you and your colleagues built something, and then it took a life of its own.
It did.
And not only that, yours is very unique because it allowed other people to come in and build and continue to build it.
Thank you.
So that kind of organic brick and mortar, which allowed the growth, is why I've been trying to get you to sit down.
Well, I wish I could have done it sooner, and I'm obviously delighted to share anything that helps.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people helped us, make a difference.
Yeah. So we had the opportunity to talk to Will McLennan, who's the Executive Director of Vision and Strategy at Epic Innovation, and you should definitely check out the inspirational work that they've done in terms of putting up a campus in a disaster-stricken area and how it's actually come up. And do look up their website, and if you have questions, do send them across, and we'll reach out to Will and request him to respond to them. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right. And we
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.